You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
The views expressed by the individuals during this broadcast are their own opinions, and they may not be the same as those of their group or other organizations they may be involved with.
All medical advice during our broadcast is not a medical opinion and should be checked with your medical physician.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to V.A.C. Roundtable number 79. And this one, we're happy to have the venerable Ellen Komp with us today. She has been with California NORML for decades and has been a leader here in California. For us that need to be informed, she has been the one to really educate us specifically on what we're looking to and towards. So let's see, share your page. There we go. Sorry, just a little bit of technical difficulties as I'm trying to get on here. But as we continue on our series of people who has commanded our respect, Ellen is definitely right up there. And if there is a Mount Rushmore,
Mount Cushmore.
I'd put you up there. You have been, and for those who aren't aware, you have been the glue that held California's communications network together, which was key because we changed the world from here. And that was a great deal due to a lot of the awesome work that you and others kept all of us aware of, where to go when the busts happen, what were the uncomfortable uglies that were happening, no matter the good, the bad, and the ugly. You were always there to educate us with real facts, real information, and that's no small task at any time, much less the sustained time that you have done it for, which is decades. I met you in 93, so 31 years ago. You interviewed me when I did my first rally in LA with Jack Herrera. And
Wow.
that's I know it goes back a ways, but we're gonna go further than that. We're gonna start with our first question, which is unique to everybody. And how did you originally come to cannabis?
Yeah. Well, you mean cannabis in general or cannabis activism or both?
Both. It's kind of a multi-layered question. When were you first turned on? When did you realize that this was a calling? And then you realize that you put your ass on the line. So, those are significant landmarks each that had to propel you towards where you are now. So we're always curious.
Yes, and I have heard some V.A.Cs before, so I was prepared for that question. So yeah, I first was turned on to marijuana when I was a freshman in college. I was 18, and I had joined a sorority, which was kind of like the animal house of sororities, and the sisters there taught me how to hold the smoke in my lungs and actually get high. And the thing is, this was 1975, and I had actually been politically active since I was 14, because the Vietnam War was on television. They were pulling my brother's draft number, and I started campaigning against Nixon because I already knew he was a crook. In 1972, in the presidential campaign, I campaigned for McGovern on his anti-war stance, and was pretty disheartened when Nixon won by a landslide that year, mostly as my neighbors who I canvassed told me, because he wasn't going to raise their taxes. And then in high school, I wore a POW bracelet. And my father came home one day and I had slapped a bumper sticker on his car.
A small little journey along the way, right?
Yeah, there's been a couple stops. Yeah.
All right. Next up would be Mike Davis, council member.
Yeah, hey, that's an incredible story. And I remember growing up in the 90s and following NORML, and these guys that part of the group they all know the story. And you guys, I remember, like, as a teenager holding up like NORML pamphlets and getting them, and I remember seeing NORML the first time and Cheech and Chong in the movies and Nice Dreams, and he was wearing his NORML shirt. And
yes, he did. Cheech wore it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And we owe it all to your organization. With my generation, Gen X, and and everybody. From me, just thanks for everything that you guys have done for everything. And that inspired me, and that's why one of the big reasons why I'm now a cannabis activist myself, and reached out to ETN about a year ago when we first met at the fair. But my question is, how does your background in biochemistry and your experience in advertising and publishing influence the work that you've done in cannabis activism?
Wow. I mean, I wasn't much of a biochemist. I figured out about halfway through college that I wanted to do something else, but I finished it up because I wanted to be scientifically literate. And I think that has helped me because, a big part of what NORML does is we really thoroughly read all the studies that come out about it. Paul Ermentano is really the main one who does that, deputy director of our national office. And because, from the beginning, there's been so much misinformation about marijuana, and it's, been so hard to study in any positive way and all of that. And so I am able to, read the odd scientific study and stuff. Like Paul will always copy me on stuff that's about like, maternal use and things like that, which has, been a big issue that's coming up again and again. And so, had there been more research into drugs and things, I might have, continued my studies in biochemistry at the time, but it didn't occur to me. I was really more interested in other things at that point. But just science was just like my background. As far as advertising and publishing, I've used those a great deal. Because starting with Jack, working with Jack, I was an editor on his book, the 9th edition, and started working with him, at his tables in Venice and also in Colorado and elsewhere, petitioning and just educating people about hemp. We did it because, like I said, we couldn't get it in the newspaper. We educated people one by one about hemp, and you just watch the little light bulbs go off in people's heads, and they'd be like, well, how do you make a shirt out of bud? And I would be like, it's the stalk of the plant, it grows, it's a plant. It doesn't just like show up in a baggie. And it was really, really beautiful time to be working in communications. ATN introduced me that way, and that's really kind of how I've seen my role as education and working with Jack. His big thing was if people just know about hemp, then they're going to vote our way, and I think more and more that's true. So, and then I spun off. So the section of Jack's book was famous people who smoked pot, like Louis Armstrong and stuff like that. And I found like when I told people about that really changed their mind, because they're like, oh, well, I admire Louis Armstrong, and here's someone who's contributed to our society, and he's a big pot smoker. Yeah, he was. So I started this website in 2002, veryimportantpotheads.com, where I started really like reading biographies and autobiographies and like nailing down people who had a connection. Bruce Lee is one, actually. I see him behind your thing. I just posted to somebody because they just named a street in Oakland for Bruce Lee. And I had done a blog post about him called How Green is the Green Dragon? Was it the Green Dragon? The Green Hornet he was. And he was a fan. And so people like that, I look for the unusual people even, like that, you wouldn't think of Bing Crosby or people like that, if I had been able to tell my parents about that, they might have been able to get them to smoke with me. And then I spun that off into my Token Women book and website blog, really, because I was particularly interested as a woman if a famous person I uncovered who had a connection to cannabis was also a woman. And so that has all, and I published a book, and I was, I had done some work in publishing and things, so I was able to publish a little book about that because people were asking me for it. Women were asking me for it, when I was going up and giving presentations about it and stuff. And that was great because women didn't really feel the connection with cannabis that men did. Like a lot of times in the early days, I'd be the only woman in the room in an activist meeting, or maybe it was somebody's wife or girlfriend. And I remember Jack telling me, when I broke up with the boyfriend who got me into it, oh, you're going to leave the movement now. I've seen it happen so many times. And I'm so insulted, that he would say that. And here I am 33 years later, I'm still in it. But at the time, too, like when we were going into Prop 64 in 2016, women were polling 10% less than men as far as wanting legalization. And we were only about at 50%. So we really needed those women to come up and be with us. And I didn't think that women were really feeling the connection, through the bromance movies and stuff, Cheech and Chong and all of those, Seth Rogen and all of those guys. We really didn't have the representation or the historical background that, or the historical, as I call it, background that we required. And so I started doing these presentations and spun it off into a book about, the subtitle of my book, Token Women, is a 4,000-year history of women in marijuana, starting with like the ancient goddesses and going up to today. And again, I document as much as possible, where those connections are and what women said about it and how it helps them with, their creative endeavors or their health or whatever. So that's been great. And yeah, and the fact that I did have a science background, I think helped when there was so much emphasis on medical marijuana. I mean, that's really when I made the turn from hemp activism to medical, because people were coming up to my hemp information tables like in wheelchairs or with cancer asking for medicine. And I knew I had to put aside the greater struggle to work for medical marijuana for those people who needed it most desperately and urgently. We were accused later of just wanting the camel's nose under the tent. But really, in my case, and in a lot of people's cases that I know, that was not at all the case. We just knew that we had to do something right away for the AIDS patients and others who needed it right away for medicine. So that's my long-winded answer to that.
Well, it shows. I mean, you really have to be well-rounded to be long-lasting, but at the same time, it helps us understand why you've always been so science-oriented and why those articles seem to you light up around them by your communications. We could tell because you have an understanding, a comprehension, which not the average person has, but it really helps to communicate with us cannabinoids who are, just doing our best to, educate and keep everybody up to point. So next up will be Council Member Nate Landau with his next question.
Hey, Ellen, I want to thank you. When I did my first state lobby day in 2019, you were so welcoming and showing me the ropes, and you really got me on a path that I'm so fortunate. So I just want to thank you so much for your decades of service, and no matter how long you've been doing it, you still have the patience to explain to newbies like me. So you're a saint in my eyes. So I just want to give you thanks from the bottom of my heart. And my question to you is, can you tell us how the chemical composition / impact of natural cannabis differs from synthetic cannabinoids? Thank you.
Wow. Well, that's an interesting question. THC, Delta 9 THC is a specific number of atoms that are joined together in a specific way, carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, right? And they're in like a ring, and you've seen pictures of it, I'm sure. And the Delta 9 refers to which part of the carbon ring the COH or CO2 group is attached to. So it's a specific molecule that has a specific reaction in the human brain, and actually, as we have found out in recent years, all throughout our body in the endocannabinoid system. So it attaches to these receptors in a kind of lock and key mechanism and activates them and does things, or actually, it's kind of like a reuptake inhibitor. Like it's in a kind of a gentler way than some drugs. So the Delta 9 THC that's in natural cannabis is no different than that same molecule that's in Marinol pills or something. But the difference is when you do it in its natural form as flour, or I guess oil or anything, it's not just one molecule, it's an assortment of molecules. It's the terpenes, which we're finding out more and more have a lot of effect. It could have other cannabinoids in it, and most of them do. And all these years we've bred out a lot of the other cannabinoids, particularly CBD, in favor of the Delta 9 THC, the reliable thing that gets you stoned. But I think we've missed a lot of the other more subtle effects, more beneficial medical effects by doing so. Like when I first smoked something that was 1-to-1 THC CBD, I said, oh, this is what I smoked in college. It was different than what was around at the time. It was more kind of expansive. It just had a kind of a different feeling to it. And so there's a lot more work to be done to study, now there's all these new sort of Franken THCs out, Delta H and on down, or sorry, Delta 8, I meant to say, and on down, that are much less well known. We don't really have the studies on them. We don't know as much how they interact with the body. And so, again, as always, prohibition has caused more dangerous drugs and compounds to be released on the public in the wrong ways. And whereas Delta 9 THC, for thousands of years, we pretty much know its safety profile, which is, it's never killed anyone. Yeah. So, okay.
That's a stickler. Peggy has a follow-up.
Yes, a follow-up on the safety profile. How can you be certain that the marinol, the synthetics, are just as safe as the natural plant, because it doesn't have the rest of the compounds with it to make it work efficiently in the system?
I mean, we don't know that it is. I mean, because it's FDA approved, it had to go through the FDA approval studies, which are, for what that's worth. But the sort of entourage effect of the different terpenes and cannabinoids that I think you and I feel. I mean, marinol is not a popular drug. I know people who've tried it. No one really likes it. Because it doesn't have it's missing, the way that nature intended it is generally the best for me when it comes to food or medicine or anything. And so, yeah, it was hard when marinol came in. They tried to sort of subvert the medical marijuana movement by saying, well, but we have this marinol and you don't need the cannabis. And we had to continue to fight for, oh, no, we need the cannabis. We want to be able to grow it in the plant. And, we have every right to do that. And marinol kind of sucks, So that I didn't really fight that battle. Like, Robert Randall and Alice O'Leary and those people really fought that battle to make sure that, they didn't just undermine really the cannabis medical marijuana movement by bringing in marinol, like, the magic pill that was going to be the answer. It really is not.
I can personally testify to that as a marinol user. Yeah, not a fan. Prefer the ensemble effect for sure. Michael Crowitz has a follow-up.
Yeah, it's great to see you, Ellen. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, you too.
I think, we've had a little bit of a conversation over the last few days in our work meetings about THC and marinol, et cetera. And, over the years, most of the conversation has been, A, about the fact that it's just THC, like you pointed out, and B, the fact that it was very expensive, right? And then finally, synthetic and made by a big corporation, which I've always figured that's why, the cannabis movement really hasn't used it more as a talking point. How can marijuana be more dangerous if it's 20% THC over 10% THC when 100% THC is perfectly fine and FDA approved? Kind of talking point. You know what I mean? So, but in the last day, we came up with I think a new question. Peggy actually came up with this, and basically it just calls for a hypothesis or a guess or thought, and that is, if I were to string up, maybe string up isn't the right word. If I was to connect, 50, hardcore cannabis consumers and have them do a blind taste, and 25 of them had synthetic THC distillate, and the other one had plant-based THC distillate or extract, or purified, absolutely purified form, could they tell a difference? Could the two groups actually tell the difference? Would they like one more than the other? I mean, it's just a really esoteric question about THC, I guess. And we don't really like THC all by itself that much anyway. But I just wondered what you thought, if people could tell the difference, if there was some, like, it goes back to another version of Peggy's question, really, about the real sort of energy, kind of question about this substance.
Well, I mean, if it was totally pure distillate and one was synthetic THC and the other was not, I don't know if you could tell the difference. But the thing is that when you start with the plant, there's just so many other factors that are wonderful and beautiful that you're not going to get in the pill. I mean, that's been part of our problem. The FDA has never approved anything but a single molecule as a medicine. And that's why a lot of people were arguing for like a whole new category for cannabis. As far as the scheduling goes, I mean, I think the whole scheduling thing should go, because that was Nixon's bullshit anyway. But that the DEA is in charge is bullshit anyway. But it really is unique in a lot of ways. It's kind of somewhere between an herbal medicine and a single compound drug. It's kind of it's both, and it's each one, and it's as we know, it has so many uses. It's so connected with mankind that the hemp seed has the perfect amino acid complement for a human being, and all these rare amino acids that you can't get anywhere else. I mean, my first hemp rally I went to, there was a biochemist who spoke, Roberta Hamilton, and I thought, oh great, I'm going to get a biochemistry lecture, out of this woman. I'm going to understand it. She got up, she was this great old lady, and she goes, I want you people to get really pissed off because hemp is the best food for mankind and they're keeping it from you. And it was like, wow, okay, Roberta. And, she went on and wrote in LB Musica, who I saw recently. She to this day takes a teaspoonful of hemp, or a tablespoon, I think, of hemp oil every night in the way that people used to take, and I do too. And she got me doing it, and it really helps. The way people used to take castor oil or something, where it really helps with digestion and stuff. And it's just, I mean, that's one part I was really, fighting for. The hemp, really the industrial hemp, and the hemp seed as a food is just something that is gone by the wayside with this focus now on hemp, making CBD, or even, turning it into an isolate, another CBD, you know what they're doing with it now. But, building materials and all kinds of other wonderful things from hemp. And Etienne knows very well because he was on the stump train with me back in the early days when we were just really changing people's minds about the plant in general by making them realize how much more it had to offer.
Yeah, I guess we're all disciples of Jack.
Yeah.
I can hear him complaining about what we have currently in my ear all the time. I think you can too. Those of us who knew him know he would not settle for what we have. Regardless, let's move on to our next question, which goes to Council Member Peggy Jones.
Thank you, Ellen, for joining us this evening. What was your involvement with early medical marijuana efforts in California, including your work with Proposition 215 and the 215 Reporter? Thank you.
Thanks, Peggy. Well, as I said, I got into the medical side of it when people started bringing their medical needs to me and stuff. And then everyone kind of decided to put their efforts into Prop 215. And that was, not at all a sure thing at the time. It was much a volunteer effort gathering signatures. So as I had done on the hemp initiatives, I was standing in front of grocery stores getting signatures all day. My goal was 200 a day. It was the hardest job I ever did. It was on your feet talking. It was like panhandling or something. Sign the petition. But it was great. It's the foot soldiering of activism. And I almost don't respect people who haven't done some of it, because that's where I really learned the issue. I learned what people's concerns were about it. I learned what arguments worked with them. And long before I ever started doing any public speaking about it, I had done my time sort of in the trenches there. And so it was a great experience, and it was wonderful to see it go over. And then immediately they tried to take it away. They had that press conference with Donna Shalala, who, by the way, just came out against the Florida measure. Barry McCaffrey calling it Cheech and Chong medicine. Who else was Janet Reno? And they threatened to take prescribing privileges away from doctors who, recommended medical marijuana. We're careful not to say prescribed. And we're not going to let it happen. And then they started raiding, the dispensary. So the first hemp headline in the 215 Reporter, which I put together with a couple of great activists, Lynn and Judy Osborne, also wonderful writers, was "The Empire Strikes Back." We had passed this. I was always told, if you don't like a law, little girl, you change it. It's like, okay, I thought I did that. I thought my job was over then, but no. And so the 215 Reporter, we did a lot of court reporting, was the main thing we were trying to do with that. Go to court, sit in court, find out what was happening with all these cases, because it was a brand new area of law. They were messing with people, and it was very difficult because, as a lot of people know who've gone to court, you show up in court that morning, oh, sorry, this has been delayed. No, we're going to reschedule this for 3 weeks down the road. And I was trying to do it, traveling all over the state and doing it. And that's why I always very much respect, like Terry Best from San Diego NORML and other people who do court reporting. It's a very important part of what we do. And what we could be doing and should be doing is, because a lot goes on that we don't get to see. And so I really loved doing it. It was short-lived because of my co-publishers had some family issues that they had to attend to, and I had some other things going on. I ended up moving up to the Bay Area and having to take a job myself because at the time there was no industry to support it. We didn't sell ads for it or anything like that. We just kind of put out, I think, just 4 issues of it, but it was some of my favorite work. So it was really the first newsletter or magazine or anything about Prop 215 after it passed. And it was a lot of fun to do. And yeah, I still look back at it fondly once in a while. And then I went and worked at Hemp World magazine. Worked in various publishing projects around it. And now it's all on the web, I guess, mostly, but yeah. So it was, yeah. And I said, I felt like we had to redouble our efforts all the time, the way they came after us, at the local level, at the federal level, at the state level, and it was our baby, and we had to defend it. And it was, and then there was, I mean, the money that came in to pass Prop 15 didn't go to any of us activists, except maybe for a little bit for signature gathering. And then they kind of ripped us off on that too. But then there was no money, like the organization that had passed it, the money that came in through DPA and stuff, that all went to other states and stuff. Like the day after, they were going to pass it in other states, and they were going to make it easier on themselves, put like 6 plant limits and all kinds of bullshit in it, and medical ID cards, like you have to in every other state. You have to sign up like a sex offender or something to get your medical marijuana. We had to fight all of that. They tried right away. They convened task forces, and they wanted to know where all the medical marijuana gardens were. The cops wanted to know all that. They wanted to make it mandatory registration. And we were like, yeah, no, here's the law. No, none of that's in there. No. But then, unfortunately, some things weren't in the law too, like employment protections. So we got that terrible Raging Wire ruling that, said, well, because all it does is exempt you from like possession and cultivation or whatever, if you're medical, it doesn't say anything about your employment rights. So it doesn't, we thought de facto it would, but no. So we had to fight that battle. We just now passed a law, 2188 last year. This was a multi-year effort. And Prop 64 didn't give employment rights either. In fact, the opposite. It said employers still can discriminate. And to this day, and I was on the phone with 2 different people today who are still being discriminated against by their employers because they don't know, or they aren't following the law, or they think they have some kind of exemption. But this California Civil Rights Department, I just heard today, has decided to take up, I think one of those cases has decided that the employer was out. So we put the law in the FEHA code, Fair Employment and Housing, and that means that the California Civil Rights Department is required to follow up on any complaints about it. And so we are advising people to do that, and hoping that, employers will start figuring out, doesn't make any sense to test people for cannabis, and it's illegal to discriminate against them now based on the inactive metabolites of cannabis, like in urine and hair tests, which were the worst, the one that we really wanted to get rid of. And so that's something that has just been ongoing ever since, like I said, I thought, well, he'll just leave us alone now. We passed this law, we're medical, we're cool. But there's so many different ways that they can still interfere with your rights, especially with the federal law the way it is. Yeah.
Thank you for that. A lot of depths, a lot of layers to this onion. People don't realize the the depth of social justice work that's required to keep them properly informed. It's really takes, a concerted effort, and it takes very dedicated people who care, as we in the military say, have fucks to give,
Yeah.
And yeah, thank you for giving a fuck for generations. We appreciate it.
It's like Jon Stewart said when he came in to the Daily Show again. He says, activism is a lunch pail job they have to do every day. And even when you change the law, you have to keep fighting to make it stick. Like, yeah, he knew. Yep, that's exactly what it is.
That's because he's a real activist too. He's not just lip service. He actually goes and testifies and puts his body and his voice on the line. for worthy causes. And of course, one of them was the veterans. So we always appreciate those who do support that, as well as your support. You have been a supporter of veterans and veterans issues, and we veterans owe a thanks to you, and we would like to extend a thanks to you for keeping us informed, as well as being such a friendly ally. We appreciate them more than realize. And unfortunately, people get hit with friendly fire just for trying to help out, us veterans. But thank you for your persistence, your hard work there.
I know what you mean there. Yep.
We are people advocating cannabis education here at paceradio.net.
Limestone City Hydroponics is Kingston, Ontario's hydroponics shop. Take your growing to the next level and create the optimal environment with a tent kit, or maximize your yield with an ebb and flow flood table kit. Either way, Limestone City Hydroponics has more sizes and options to fit your needs. Are you looking for the power of the sun that adapts to your budget? Then look no further, as they have professional grow lighting. They have indoor grow systems that are easy and cost effective, with many options to fit your living space and lifestyle. Cultivate your growing potential. We have everything you need to succeed. And if you can't make it to the store, they offer local delivery to the greater Kingston area. Remember, when you're looking for experts to help you grow, then look no further than the locally owned Limestone City Hydroponics, 105 Sunderland Drive in Kingston, Ontario. Call them at 613-548-0420. Are you looking for non-stop, continuous cannabis and psychedelic programming? If you are, then turn your browsers to 420radio.ca or paceradio.net, where you will find the 420 Pace re-rolled Saturday. Everything gets started at 8 a.m. Eastern Saturday morning.
Enjoy the buzz of legalization with Campbellford Lifestyle Shop. From lights to plant nutrients, books, consumption accessories, and more, we've got all your basics to grow or consume cannabis. Visit our info center or take a look at our piercing services and body jewelry, now available in-store through Campbellford Lifestyle Shop, 17 Bridge Street West, Campbellford.
Are you looking to get your medical cannabis grow license? Limestone City Hydroponics can help patients through the process of obtaining their license to grow medical cannabis. What's that? You don't have a doctor? If you meet the medical criteria, Limestone City Hydroponics has a nurse practitioner who can assess and provide medical cannabis prescriptions. What are you waiting for? Contact Limestone City Hydroponics at limestonecityhydroponics.ca or call them at 613-548-0420.
PACE Radio is the People Advocating Cannabis Education Radio Network.
Legacy 420 have an awesome array of cannabis-infused beverages, from pop to Nature's Nectar's teas, all in amazing flavors. What a selection! We even have a delicious mango-infused juice, and let me tell you, it's delicious.
Everything is infused in-house, so we buy our syrup from the same place where everybody else buys their syrup for their pop, and the infusion is done in the lab. It's all canned here, labeled here, produced 100% on Tyndonega.
We have two lines of drinks. One is called our Nature's Nectar. That was our original line that we came out with, and then we also have a line under the Red E brand. We have them in 10 milligrams, 30 milligram, and 60 milligram cans.
What a great selection for a get-together with friends or after a long day. Remember, if you want to wet your whistle with on-site lab-tested products, come see your trusted partner. Legacy 420 out on your road.
You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
Next up for their next question is Michael Crowitz.
Yeah, I want to run with that for a second, because I want to, say a couple of words to sort of back up the claim that I feel you're one of the most important cannabis activists in our country. As a director of Veterans for Medical Cannabis Access, we worked on adding post-traumatic stress as a qualifying condition, starting with Brian Crumb's great work, and of course California's Prop 215 and everybody's great work. Starting with Dennis Perone and Dr. Mickery and others. Starting from there, we then added post-traumatic stress in all the other states. And principally, we started in a handful of states, about 6 states: Colorado, Washington State, Oregon, California. And I came up in the movement, handing out flyers and info table and working my way up to a leadership position. And I'm very much a movement guy. I took over Veterans for Medical Cannabis Access from a top-down guy, Marty Chilcutt. Marty Chilcutt was very successful at this. I mean, he was single-handedly responsible for Amendment 2 in Colorado, where he saw what y'all did in California and said, called up Ethan Nadelman and said, I think I can do that. You give me the money, I'll do it. And he wrote the initiative and put it on the table. It was just a tiny little top-down effort. But when he got to Michigan and he started to do that there, Marijuana Policy Project kind of lifted it from his hands and traded him, a few dollars to start this organization. And when I took it over, I made the choice to make it not corporate, make it fully voluntary. And in most of the states that I worked in, I only set up infrastructure like in a couple of states. The rest of the states, I used existing infrastructure. And, being able to, back my work both in that project, but also in one of the most significant fights that we had, where we had a rogue mid-level manager. And when I say mid-level, I'm talking about somebody that was in charge of millions of veterans in Southern California and Nevada area. And that rogue administrator, you helped me handle quite well. And I was the veterans advocate, you were the California advocate. We were seamless in our approach. And I do consider you. And one last little thing before I go to the question, which I think leads into the question quite well. In that effort, in my brain, I'm just sort of trying to figure out how many were men and how many were women of that sort of short list of the leaders that I worked with in the various states. And I'd say it was pretty much a 50-50 split, which was way higher than the percentage of women in leadership generally in the movement. So I consider that, to be at least notable, if not interesting. But the question goes to, ask you to talk about the role that you played in prompting awareness of women's contributions to cannabis culture, particularly through the book Token Women and related projects.
Yeah, I kind of already covered that, Michael. I don't know if you were here. There, it started from Jack's book, his sections about famous people who were, connected to it, and I spun it off into that. But as far as what you were talking about, that mid-level manager, I did want to talk about that because that was in 2015, and that's where you and I really got to work together. And I spent a couple of months down in Southern California going to VAs with veterans because, yeah, you had done that great work and gotten the policy at the national level where the VA was not permitted to discriminate against a veteran for using state legal medical cannabis. But this mid-level manager, who was neither a veteran nor a doctor, as I recall, put out a memo and decided, no, you weren't going to get your opiates, you weren't going to get what you needed if you used medical cannabis. And it was in direct conflict with that. And nonetheless, it took a couple of months at least. I was just looking back at my webpage. I was doing like updates about it. Oh, this guy, he's out of town this week, but he'll be back next week and we'll deal with him then. And I mean, we were like right on top of it. Like we were just like, it was great working with you on that, Michael, because I mean, I got to meet a lot of veterans there. In fact, I remember this one woman, Lorraine Horse, was just wonderful. And again, I guess as a woman, it impacts me even more when I see a woman suffering. And it's just, I mean, people are just so furious when I tell them, that we're denying our veterans and that we're denying our women, medicine that they need if they've done service. I mean, it's just something that we can really all be on the same page on. If it weren't for these crazy bureaucracies, and it's just another case of, yeah, you can change a policy, you can change a law, but getting it implemented is a whole other step. Again and again, in fact, we passed a law last year, as well as the AB 2188, the employment rights law, we passed AB 1954, which says that doctors are not supposed to be able to discriminate against patients for using medical cannabis, right? Because again, they drug test, they find out, they kick you off opiates. Of course, doctors under a lot of pressure right now to kick people off opiates, and that's just one population they can do it to, right? And that's another one where we're having a devil of a time getting it implemented. Kaiser Healthcare, in fact, I still get complaints all the time from them. And then if you're in the Kaiser system, you're stuck with that system. You can't just go to a different doctor. And they're still continuing to discriminate. And I think, even though veterans go to VA hospitals, I think that law should strengthen your rights in California. Within California, it's not legal for any healthcare plan to have a policy in place that they deny you medicine based on your use of medical marijuana. I haven't been getting complaints from VA patients like I did, and I hope that's because things are better there. But I would love the day when, like in Canada, I believe they're dispensing medical cannabis to patients. Isn't that true in VAs in Canada? Yeah. So now what we have to do in California to help our veterans, and this is now where I'm working with veterans a lot, is these compassion programs, which we had to pass a bill twice, vetoed the first year, passed the second year, because when Prop 64 came in and legalized recreational use, it got rid of a lot of it. Well, it enacted this taxation scheme, and it didn't leave an exemption for donations. And so people that couldn't afford to give away donated cannabis to people in need because they had to pay tax on it. So we had to pass a law to take out that tax. And then we got it passed, but only with a 5-year sunset. So this year we had to go back and get the law renewed. And ATN was one, and Nate, who came up to Sacramento with us, and we worked on that law. We got it through 4 fiscal committees, and also, the floor votes. And we're waiting on our, Gavin only has 3 more days to sign that bill. We haven't really had, the budget people, objected, but not too strenuously to it because it will possibly cost some money. But they did understand, and they really put it in their analysis, that this was like a but-for tax, they called it, not B-U-T-T, but B-U-T-F-O-R tax. So this is because we were saying you're really not losing tax income, because this report that you have is saying, if these products have been sold in the dispensary at dispensary prices, they would have generated this much tax. But the problem is that the people that were giving this medicine to, they couldn't have afforded to buy it at dispensary prices in the first place. And so you're not really missing out on any tax. So they understood that and put that in so we had to work with, the committee members, the analysts for the committees. It's a very complicated process. And then you got to do it all over again in the next house. And but we got it through, and with a lot of help of great people. And I want to give a shout out to the memory of one who came to testify. I'm so upset about it that I'm blanking. The woman who passed away this week, who came and testified. ATN, you know who that is?
Sandra.
Yeah. Sandra. Came and testified. She was a veteran who came and testified on, and we just got the sad news that she passed away this week. So I put out another push for it this week. So we got to do this for Sandra. We got to get this passed. So I very much hope that we're gonna have that bill, that we're gonna have that renewed, and we're gonna be able to continue to help veterans. But it's really just a stopgap. In the end, the federal government should be providing it as medicine, like they provide every other medicine, and getting vets off more dangerous drugs that so many of them are on. And we're still seeing the huge number of veteran suicides and everything. That's the dog tag I wear now, is the 22 that Sue Sisley gave me, about the 22 suicides a day that were happening in veterans. I mean, it's unconscionable. So anyway, you have your hand up, Michael.
Yeah. I wanted to say a word or two about the whole idea of kicking someone out of treatment, for a drug test, quote, violation of a pain contract or violation of drug testing, urine testing, and be kicked out of treatment, most especially, like you said, pain management, getting kicked off your opiates. And 2 things about that. One is the fight that I had inside the VA, which was right at about 10 years, that led to the VA policy that you were talking about. The reason it wasn't all 10 years inside the VA. I started that fight outside the VA, but I felt like it was almost impossible to fight that fight because doctors had so much latitude on how they should act in the pre-world, in the real, regular world, where I felt like doctors inside the VA would be constrained more by the Constitution. I was wrong. But it turned out that it did actually work. The work that I worked through the VA did finally, with a little bit of luck and a little bit of wind and a little bit of our movement infrastructure, did lead to a cannabis policy in the VA. But I just want to say, that right now, the consequences of this drug testing are death or suffering. If you stick with your doctor and quit the cannabis, then you don't have as effective treatment. If you leave the doctor with your cannabis and go to the street, those are the people that are dying from fentanyl, that are feeding, like, I think it's 100,000 a year right now. It's the biggest death in certain age groups, in demographics. It's unbelievable. And that's why it's not, they may have become addicted to their OxyContin or whatever, but they're not dying from the OxyContin. There's a break in that story. And the break in the story is exactly what we're talking about, where you get kicked out of treatment, or you overgrow their ability to give you the pills or whatever, and you wind up on the street. And that's where people are dying. And I think that in the end, what really needs to happen to make sure that these drug testing doesn't wind up getting worse, even from this point on, would be the medical boards getting involved. And I've seen that for several years, 10, 15 years now, that if especially the national group of medical boards would come out with some language. But you got to understand, when I started, most doctors thought it was federal edict to do it. They thought the federal government wanted them to kick people out, weed them out, no pun intended, out of their. So getting the VA policy was really important, because it showed that, hey, if the VA, a federal government entity, isn't doing it, then obviously you don't have to either, was sort of my logic, in the success there. And so anyway, I just want to let in.
That policy and that argument really helped us get AB 1954 passed, because we were able to say, look, the VA's doing it, so, and hopefully, and the younger doctors, they get it more, it's kind of the old guard that, is just really resisting it. And, and there aren't a lot of studies on dosage and how, doctors aren't taught about it in the same way they are about other drugs. And like we were talking earlier, it's not just a single molecule in the whole plant. And, there's a subtlety to it and stuff that, it's just not that kind of lockstep, rigid kind of education that doctors get about drugs and things. And so it's part of a big sea change, but I've always seen cannabis reform as part of a greater change in society overall. And, I can't wait for some of those other changes to come, and find more time to work on those. So, yeah.
Step by step, inch by inch. Well, our next question you kind of answered, but I kind of want you to go deeper. It's how has your activism evolved over the years, from your early involvement from CA NORML and then the Lynn Smith Center to your current leadership role in California NORML? I mean, you really started, kind of at the fryers there at McDonald's, and worked your way all the way up to ownership. You know what I'm saying?
I wasn't paid minimum wage. I was paid nothing.
But that's important for people to know, is that a lot of our early activism, we volunteered. There was no payment for. We felt compelled. The social justice issues, the injustices, were payment enough for us to work toward righting them. Correct?
Yeah, it cost us money, like for Xeroxing and things, like my record was passing out 4,500 flyers in one afternoon, but I had to pay to Xerox them, but 4 up though, so you could cut them, like 4 in 1. So yeah, CA NORML, I was a volunteer. I was doing all kinds of other things. I was working also for Hemp and for Jack, and working for Jerry Brown for president, and I was just doing everything I could. And they let me, sit there with a desk and a phone summit CA NORML, and I tried to fundraise, but I was lousy at it. Timothy Leary was going to come to an event, but then he flaked out last minute. But I think we made $500 on that one. And then I did land a job at the Lynn Smith Center in San Francisco. So that was the George Soros funded event, or entity that became the Drug Policy Alliance. And that was, so I did get paid for a time there doing that. Not the kind of money it takes to live in San Francisco, but I did get some payment there. And that was that was great as far as, medical marijuana was getting more and more solidified. I would, plan, educational events and worked with a lot of great people who were working on like some of these deeper policies. Like I got involved in heroin overdose actually because I was at a conference and some woman stood up and, she had lost her kid to a heroin overdose and his friends had driven him around for an hour, afraid to take him to the emergency room and where Narcan could have saved him. And this is before people really knew about Narcan. So I was involved in the early trying to get Narcan known about out there. I met Boz Skaggs as his son had died from a heroin overdose, and we did some PSAs with him, just trying to get the word out. And finally, and this is another case where it just took so long, but finally, that is happening. It's like there's a cure for it. There's a cure for heroin overdose. This lady's son didn't have to die. Oh, and I went to my bosses. I said, "Could I work on this issue too?" And they're like, "Oh yeah." So I worked a lot also on drug education. In fact, my number one question at the time was, "Where are the when people would call, where are the studies that show that DARE doesn't work?" And that was the first folder in my file cabinet. I mean, because there were a lot of studies showing not only did DARE not work, it made it worse. It told kids about which drugs to try. It increased drug use and to harder drugs. So my boss at the time was Marcia Rosenbaum, who was a PhD sociologist. She had a book called Safety First because she went and interviewed heroin addicts in prison for her doctoral thesis. And they all told her, well, it started on marijuana, but then, it wasn't very harmful. So I thought, well, I guess then heroin isn't very harmful either. So that's where the gateway drug is a problem, because it's like, yes, if you lie to people, if you lie to children about drugs, they're not going to believe you about the drugs that you really have to tell them, are harmful. And so it was a lot of work. We have this conference, Just Say No, KNOW, about drug education and just trying to bring in a more reasonable kind of drug education that was really going to help kids and get the police out of it. Like, what were the police doing in schools teaching kids about drugs? I mean, it just was, crazy. So I got to work a lot on that issue, and that was fun. And then Kevin Sabat, who now a lot of people know who that is, he came to that Just Say No conference. He called me. This is one of the first things he did. He was still a student. He's now running SAM. He wangled a free ticket into it. I let him in. He was a student. Before we got home from the conference, and it had been a great conference, and all kinds of wonderful things had happened. Before we got home, Sabat had already gotten published an article slamming the conference, and how terrible it was and everything. And Marcia just reminded me of this recently because I was like, man, this Kevin Sabat, he just doesn't stop. And she's like, well, remember when we met him? I said, oh my God, that's right, that sneaky little no good so and so. And so he's but we have our Kevin Sabats in California. Now we have this group. Actually, they're based out of Oakland Public Health Institute. They're funded largely by the Conrad Hilton Foundation. They have sent information to every city and county in California, largely working through health departments, demanding fewer cannabis outlets, no consumption rooms, high local taxes on cannabis. And they also advise the people who are at the trough, because when Prop 64 passed, it had a lot of money in it for social welfare organizations, like helping the communities impacted by the war on drugs and, probably some good stuff. But they lead the charge whenever we try to bring the taxes down to some level that's going to actually help the industry stay alive in California, which it totally is not. I mean, you just saw Harborside's now also going out of business. They fight it because they're at the trough, they're getting the money, and they're fighting against keeping the industry viable so that we can keep sending them the tax money. That's what's going on largely at the local level. We're trying to get, and we had to fight. This has been another 2-year fight, and I don't know whether the governor will sign this bill either, to allow, when you go into a cannabis lounge, because those are permitted by Prop 64. However, you have to get local approval, and that is a thing. A lounge would be able to also prepare and serve non-cannabis, non-alcoholic food and beverages, like a cup of coffee or a sandwich, or like a bar can, like you can go into a bar and have a sandwich or something. Do you think we can get this bill passed? The anti-tobacco folks, some of these same groups that I talked about, Lynn Silver from the Public Health Institute, they come in and testify against it. Oh, this is going to go back to the smoke-filled rooms of, restaurants and everything. And we got rid of this in California. These were people that worked very hard to get smoke-free California. They take tobacco money to do it. Like, I don't know how much per tobacco pack of cigarettes in California. It's a huge amount of tax that they get. They suck up that money and they're using it against cannabis. They're completely equating cannabis smoke with tobacco smoke, even though the studies don't show that necessarily. But we can't even really have that conversation because there's just this lockstep anti-smoking type thing going on in the legislature and with the governor. And that's why he vetoed it last year. He said he was concerned about the effect of secondhand smoke on restaurant workers. And we put in all kinds of protections this year. We worked with the UFCW, the United Food and Commercial Workers, who organize cannabis workers and also restaurant workers, for some protections, separation between areas, and they can wear a mask if they want to. I mean, so whether that's going to be enough to have Gavin sign this bill in support of not only the cannabis industry, but the social aspect of cannabis. I mean, ATN, you remember back in the old days of BPG where you could just go and sit and smoke it. Now you go into a cannabis store, it's like going to a bank. You stand in line, you get your thing, you go home, and if you're lucky enough, if your landlord lets you smoke it at your apartment, you can smoke it there. But it's just anathema to the whole community and socialization that is such a big part of what cannabis is and what our culture is. And so we're pushing to get more of these lounges up and running and keep them, financially viable. And, this would be one thing that would help. Woody Harrelson cut a video in favor of this bill. It's AB 1775. Whoopi Goldberg did, and also Bill Maher. They had a press conference in front of the Woods, which is owned by Maher and Harrelson. And so maybe this year he'll sign it. But, he has his eye on the presidency. He's very wanting to craft his image in a certain way, it seems. And we thought that might have been a reason he vetoed it last year. So you can still go to canormal.org and take action on any of these bills. There's another one that would allow small farmers to sell it at farmers market. I'd like to be able to smell and see my cannabis when I buy it. There's some issues from some retailers for it. They want to keep it fair, but I think that it would help the industry in general. And then there's one that would, and so there's double taxation at the local level. So you have to impose a local tax on the excise tax, on the state excise tax. So you're taxing the tax, and also on deliveries and all kinds of other stuff. ATN, you can help me out here because you actually run a dispensary. So this would help. And some of that double taxation, the bill last year was stronger. It would have impacted the state excise tax. This one only affects local taxes, and it did not have any opposition. So it might be symbolic if it passes. Maybe we can get tax reform, because next year, as a lot know, we're going to have to fight off the raising of the excise tax from 15% to as much as 19% because of these same do-gooder groups that I've been telling you about. The only way that we got the end of the cultivation tax was if there was something in there that said if taxes fell under a certain level that the excise tax could be raised. And so that's going to be a major battle next year, not to mention the hemp aspect coming in. I mean, one of the hemp lobbyists, the one who's lobbying for Cheech and Chong, said they would accept a 5% excise tax. And I said, oh, that sounds good. Let's bring that in across the board. My only hope is that could break up with everything and just be like, okay, let's hell with all these crazy regulations that are, choking the whole thing to death. So hard to watch. Anyway, have I answered that question? What was the question?
Yeah, I think you've covered it and gone into areas of that matter. I mean, yeah, look, running dispensaries hard. There was a golden age. That time has passed. It is sad to see, Harborside and others, MedMen and others just fall by the wayside. And but I'm turning 25 next month. You know, BPG's been doing it for 25 years. Still,
Wow.
we haven't stopped. We're the, you know, oldest in North America, continuously operating. I mean, what's her face over, you know, was the first generation, but she only recently in the past few years got her dispensary back. So Lynette Shaw, yeah. And yeah, it's just, yeah, insanity peppers. All right, well, let's get to our next question, which will be Mike Davis, Council Member Davis.
Yeah, so speaking of any inspirational women, was there any women that historically speaking that you look up to or maybe aspire to be like?
Well, there is one, except she's I won an award at NORML, the award for female leadership for NORML. Oh my gosh. Oh, I want to aspire to her, but I can't think of her name. She was the woman who helped bring about the end of alcohol prohibition by she was kind of a society woman, and she just was like, you know, she just wasn't having it, because interestingly, women, as we know, kind of brought in alcohol prohibition, right? And I mean, I come from an Irish Catholic family where, yeah, my grandfather drank away his paycheck and there were 6 kids, and you know, it was not popular among women that men were, you know, a lot of immigrant men, you know, they were going to bars and spending all their money, and Carrie Nation and all of that stuff. So women kind of have a bad rap for bringing about alcohol prohibition, which is, of course, a failed policy and brought in gangsters and, you know, all kinds of other problems, bathtub gin and all of that. But this woman came in with, I can look up her name. She was a big reason that we ended alcohol prohibition.
Frances
and I
Willard?
just thought, no. Let's see, NORML Activist Women Award. Let's see. Oh, Diane Vorbacher. What is her name? Oh, Pauline Sabin. Pauline Sabin. That's her. In fact, I had to tell someone put her on a list of famous cannabis activists. I'm like, no, she wasn't a cannabis activist, but she was just someone who you know, was able to bring together the right people at the right time, and you know, there wasn't really anything in it for her except that she just wanted to end alcohol prohibition, and she was a big reason. So that, yeah, they named the award at NORML for her, and she is someone I definitely admire and would like to be like.
Well, you're your own inspiration to us, so you know, just saying.
Yeah.
Next up will be Council Member Wade Laughter. Council Member Laughter.
Thank you, Ken. And I would apologize to all of you for my tardy arrival. It's been a busy full day here. I'm particularly excited, Ellen, that you're here today. You are an inspiring woman in my life and work. I've met you several times. Monica, my wife and partner, asked me to specially call you out for the kind gift of the button you sent us. Yeah, I wear it. So anyway, that being said, I love this question. You kind of answered it already in some of the things you shared since I got on the call. But if you had a magic wand, what's going on in the cannabis market today, everything from the challenges for the cultivators to the hemp thing to, you know, you understand this whole mad mess better than most. If you could wave a magic wand, what would it look like? What would you change today so that the cannabis market actually had a chance to survive and provide for patients and those who just enjoy what cannabis can do for them? Thank you, Ellen. And nice to
Thanks,
see you.
Wade. Yeah, say hi to Monica.
I'll do that.
Oh shoot, that's my phone. Hang on. Pause 1 minute while I turn this off. That must have been a nice view. I always envisioned it more because I spent time up in Humboldt County with the growers and everything, and they were always totally against legalization. I was just going to screw everything up, and I got to say, they were right. Except, I always said, well, we need our full human rights, and then we got legalization. We still didn't have our employment rights, and we still don't have all that. But I always envisioned it more like, like the wine industry, where like Humboldt would be kind of like the Napa of what Napa is to wine, where you would have, people would go by and they'd go see their farmer and they'd do a tasting and they'd, see how it's grown and, tourism and everything. And down to where, like I said, I'd like to be able to have a tasting, like go in, like we got it at the state fair this year. That was not easy. I had a bitch and moan about that, but it was really Embark and the equity folks who brought that in, and that was hugely successful. So we had both sales and consumption at the state fair. I mean, they made us go through all kinds of ring. Again, I didn't do it, but all the people, you had to go walk down this path and get to the back, and it wasn't. But it was a start, and there was 10% greater attendance at the state fair, even though like most days it was triple digit figures. 10% increase in food and beverage sales. Hello, we get the munchies. And reporters were calling me, oh, what's this going to be like? I said, it's going to be great. It's, I know my people. And it was a totally mellow scene. There were no issues. People were coming to the state fair just because they were going to have cannabis this year. People who had coming out of the woodwork, who hadn't like really connected with it for a while, and the other kind of curious and stuff. I mean, we're a wonderful community. And if we can do more things to bring it together, and we can connect with the plant more and, have it taste. Yeah. So then I walk into the wine tasting area of the place, and first of all, no one's carding you at the door. It's this big, huge tent. There's food inside, and I could have tasted three types of wine a day for free. It's like, okay. So even when we had the sales and consumption, you couldn't have the farmer there with like in the old days, the bag of it. Oh, how's this smell? Yeah, that's good. I'll try some of that. That looks nice and fresh. We have to break down some of those barriers, and we have to break down the barriers to not allowing people to gather together. And that's starting to happen places like Outside Lands and stuff now. If I could afford to go to Outside Lands, I would have checked that one out too. But that. And then it'll just take care of itself, because we have to raise humanity's consciousness level, or the planet's gone. It's and that's why psychedelics are important too, to be bringing in at this time. I mean, this is we've got to get back to the garden. We've got to get back to the garden. So I would break down those barriers, between people and all that misunderstanding and can't we all just get a bomb?
Thank you, Ellen. That was a wonderful breath of fresh air.
Thanks.
No, it's what makes you the awesome Ellen that you are. And thank you for taking the time to share with us. I hope we've been able to convey the respect that we have for you and your many years of service to this plant and continued service. I told Dale this, and it's the same thing. When I one of the proud moments was when I was, remember the Ed Rosenthal trial. I was the first of the recalcitrant 7, and we were finally let go after all being held in contempt of court. And I remember the doors opening up and our lawyers pushing us out the door. And I just remember you and Dale's faces just beaming with these huge smiles. And as an activist, you did right when the people who you respect, your mentors, etc., that's a genuine smile. You have to pay a high price to get one of those smiles in life, and I hope nobody has to ever get that. But you know, that smile still carries me to this day. In times of trouble, I just remember just walking through the fire. Eventually you arrive at the smiles. So thank you for being the mentor and the smiles for us along the way to keep us in the trenches going. And you're not just a woman leader, you're a leader. That's why I don't put you on a Mount Rushmore of women. I put you up there as we state out of respect for hard work, dedication, and you know, who knows if you add it all up, the amount of money we've lost doing what we do. But you know, we don't do it for the money. We do it for the change because we have the right, we have that privilege, and we have that honor. And so, in closing tonight, I want to dedicate this episode to Sandra Bacon, who passed away this week, who was an activist that was there for all of us along the way. And may her light continue to shine in others. Unfortunately, now that it's extinguished, but it still burns bright in others' hearts that, you know, she touched along the way. So thank you for being one of those along the way. And I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight on our V.A.C. Roundtable number 79. Thank you, Peggy Jones, Michael Davis, Michael Crowitz, Nate Landau, Wade Laughter, our guest Ellen Komp, and myself, Etienne Fontan. And thank you, everybody. And we'll be back in a couple weeks with V.A.C. number 80. Have a great rest of your night. And
All right.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
The opinions of the individuals during this broadcast are their own, and may not be the opinions of their group or other organizations they may be involved with. All medical advice during our broadcast is not a medical opinion and should be checked with your medical physician.
When you have a pain that's reached its peak, Legacy for 20, it's so unique. If organic cannabis is what you seek, here's your trusted partner 7 days a week. Suppository salves, vapes and drops, topicals, edibles, infused pop. Just when life seems like it ain't easy, at Legacy 420, enjoy a pop freezy. Lab tested products, make them the GOAT. Legacy 420 out on your road. Legacy 420 in Tyndonega Mohawk territory. Indigenous organic cannabis at its finest.
Enjoy the buzz of legalization with Campbellford Lifestyle Shop. From lights to plant nutrients, books, consumption accessories, and more, we've got all your basics to grow or consume cannabis. Visit our info center or take a look at our piercing services and body jewelry, now available in-store through Campbellford Lifestyle Shop, 17 Bridge Street West, Campbellford.
Limestone City Hydroponics is Kingston, Ontario's hydroponics shop. Take your growing to the next level and create the optimal environment with a tent kit, or maximize your yield with an ebb and flow flood table kit. Either way, Limestone City Hydroponics has more sizes and options to fit your needs. Are you looking for the power of the sun that adapts to your budget? Then look no further, as they have professional grow lighting. They have indoor grow systems that are easy and cost effective, with many options to fit your living space and lifestyle. Cultivate your growing potential. We have everything you need to succeed. And if you can't make it to the store, they offer local delivery to the greater Kingston area. Remember, when you're looking for experts to help you grow, then look no further than the locally owned Limestone City Hydroponics, 105 Sunderland Drive in Kingston, Ontario. Call them at 613-548-0420.
We are people advocating cannabis education here at Pace Radio.